Hello and welcome to the Evolving Spiritual Practice podcast. My name is Ralph Cree. This is brought to you in association with bodyheartmindspirit.co.uk. In this episode I talk to Chris Lewis, who is 16,000 miles into a 20,000 mile walk all the way around the UK coastline. The first part of his walk, for the first 3 years, he was on his own, and then the last year or so he's been walking with his fiancée Kate. And the topic of our conversation was the benefits and the discoveries you make of spending time alone in the wild. It's one of the most ancient techniques for developing self-reliance, introspection, learning about yourself, learning about your place in the world and your relationship to nature, those kind of things. And depending on what area in the world we're talking about, they call it a walkabout, vision quest, those kind of things. I did a 7-month trip in my early 20s around Scotland, England and Wales on my own with a backpack, and it was one of the best things I've ever done in terms of learning about who I was. So that's what I explore with Chris. He's got a lot to say about it. He was properly surviving, foraging for food, doing it with very, very little money, and he's a real inspiration. So I hope you enjoy this conversation. Chris Lewis.
Hello Ralph, how are you?
I'm good. Welcome to the Evolving Spiritual Practice podcast.
Thank you for having me.
We're going to talk about solo time in the wilderness. It's one of the most ancient transformational activities
Indeed.
that people have been doing, forever. I'm thinking of a lot of the initiations that boys went through to become men, spending extended period of time in the wilderness.
Yeah.
Like a vision quest, that kind of thing, walkabouts. There's lots of different names
Indeed,
for it.
Yeah.
And you've been on a really epic one, and you haven't finished it, but you're just setting the stage for people listening to this that might not know you. That you have walking the entire UK coastline.
That's right. Yes.
And just remind me how many miles that is.
So it's around just under 20,000. I would say the majority of that is the west coast of Scotland and the islands. Like Skye's 1,000 miles, Shetland's 1,000 mile, Moles I think it's about 800. So it all adds up. So it's quite hard to, when you see the UK as a whole on the map, it only seems really small. But the circumference of the world is 25,000 miles. So you're only short of 5,000 miles from going around the world.
Yeah.
So hence the reason it's taken me so long.
So you go literally around every single island,
Yeah.
no matter how small, and
Yeah.
off the west coast of Scotland there's a ton of them.
Yeah.
Did you go, so have you just done Northern Ireland?
Yeah, I've done Northern Ireland as well. I
Yeah.
didn't do Southern Ireland, more for a safety thing than anything, because I'm doing this for a veterans charity. So, I kind of steered away from that one. But I really do want to go back and do Ireland. I feel bad missing it, even though it's not part of the UK. I really wanted to do it, but one day.
Yeah.
One
Have
day.
you ever been to Ireland?
I have indeed, yeah.
Yeah, okay.
I like Ireland.
Yeah.
I lived in Northern Ireland for a good few years, so I'd often travel down. And when I left the army, I drove, so I was a driver for articulated lorries, and I was driving for a sun-blessed, and just go down to County Cavan. It's a beautiful place, really, really nice. But as a coast, I've not seen any of it.
Yeah.
Nothing.
I've done from Cork all the way up to Sligo, all along the coast.
Good surf up there.
yeah, right. So you've been doing this for 4.5 years so far?
It's just over 4.5 years now. So I left on the 1st of August 2017. It's surreal because doing something like this, there's never a time limit. I didn't have a clue, basically. But I did think maybe in a year and a half, but I totally underestimated, every part of the coast that I went to. I made sure that I kept it a surprise to myself. I didn't want to know about it because I like the exploration side of things. So I had no idea it was going to take me this long, but I would do it all again, without a doubt.
And then you started off on your own.
Yes.
And then somewhere along the way you picked up a dog.
Yes.
Who's here,
yeah,
Jet.
got Jet here.
So how long had you been going before you met Jet?
So I had come through. I'd done Wales, the west coast of England, up into Scotland, Northern Ireland, and then sort of like went into Ayrshire on the west coast of Scotland. So I've been going for about 9 months before I picked her up, and she belonged to a family that were unable to have her anymore. So I knew that I was just about to go and start doing the islands, and Jet and I just connected immediately. I just knew it. So I would have been very choosy of what dog to take with me. I needed a breed that, for example, could handle the kind of stuff that I was going to be doing. I didn't want them to put them through any more stress than need be. But she's a sight hound, perfect breed for it, and she's at the time of her life. So that was an absolute game changer, getting Jet.
Yeah,
it really was.
Cool. And then a bit later on, you met a lady called Kate.
Yes.
So how far into your journey was that?
So I had, that would have been after the first lockdown. I just finished Shetland and came back to the north coast of Scotland, and I was just camped. It's 3.5 years, I think, before I actually met Kate. 3 years before I met Kate. Yeah, how time flies. 4.5 years, mad. So yeah, I just was down at the bottom of some steps. My tent had been broken, so I'd actually been staying in somebody's garden in a teepee. But there's a lot of people coming over all the time, and I was quite tired at this point because my Facebook page has really picked up, and I was getting a lot of people asking questions all the time, everywhere I went. So I just wanted some space for a night, and it was just potluck. Half an hour after I rocked up, I was fixing my tent pole just to sleep for the night, and Kate just walks down the steps, and we had a 5-minute brief conversation because there was other people talking to me at the same time. And then Kate left, and then about 40 minutes to an hour later, she come back with her tent. She was on her own little adventure, wild camping around the North Coast 500. And she come down with her tent, 2 cans of Tennants, some fish and chips, and win-win. So we just hit it off, and it's really surreal because having been on my own and spent so much time on my own for so long, in the wildest parts you have in the UK, it was really weird because Kate camped next to me and we spent the whole night just chatting and talking, and we just realised we had so much in common. And normally by that point I think I'd be very ready for somebody. I don't mean this harshly. I'd be ready to be back on my own again and just have my own time, my own peace, and I didn't want her to leave. So I knew that there was something there. We kept in touch, and for about 6 weeks she came up for our first date, which was in a bothy on the west coast of Scotland, an old shepherd's hut, and that was it. The rest is history. Literally a few weeks later she came back up and never went home. She joined me, so loved it.
And then so you started travelling, and then you have ended up here taking a little break from your journey because Kate is about to give birth.
Yes.
So you've been staying with me to have your baby, and then see where the next bit goes.
Yeah, absolutely.
And that's how we met.
Yeah, indeed.
Yeah, and so the portion of your adventure that I wanted to explore with you today was the bit before you met Kate. So not that
the interesting bit.
not that I'm not interested in your life with Kate. That's an amazing story, and you've got a Facebook page with tons of stuff on there about all the stuff you've done together, and it's really wonderful.
Thank you.
But there's something which there's something that you and I have in common, which is a love of time on our own in the wilderness.
Yeah.
And so the sort of period where you're on your own, and then with Jet for that time, that was 3 years.
3 years, yeah.
3 years, okay. That's a pretty decent chunk of time. So I've done a lot of backpacking around the world, but in terms of solo stuff, I've done a mere 7 months.
But that's still epic.
It's a lot more than a lot of people do. 4 months in Scotland, 2 months in Wales, and 1 month in Ireland. And this was a long time ago, before there were no smartphones.
Yeah.
Few people had mobile phones. I didn't have one. I think I had a pager, something like that.
Yeah, I remember those.
So I was totally out of contact. I didn't even have a camera, so I didn't record. None of it's recorded.
Wow.
It only lives in my memories.
Yeah. But that's nice.
And stories and that. But so quite a different quite a different time. But so the thing that I'm really interested in exploring are some of the things which are these time-honoured phenomena that happen for people when they spend extended time on their own in the wild. And one of the reasons why people do it is to learn more about themselves and nature and your relationship with life and nature and your past and your present and the future. I mean, suddenly it all becomes very intense because you haven't got the normal distractions.
You're away from the clutter of life, isn't it? So, yeah.
So what? Was there? Why did you start? Why did you decide to do it in the first place? On a kind of internal sense, your own journey of self-discovery.
So I'd been a single parent. In fact, I'll start with the fact that the outdoors since I've been a child is my go-to. I absolutely adore it. I spent every living waking minute that I could outside, climbing trees, being mischievous. Just being a young lad, but outside. It's so different now because obviously we've got more computers, and I think people have detached themselves from it. But I spent so much time doing it, and what I realised was when as a single parent, I'd suddenly become part of this one thing. I'm not talking about my daughter, but the whole system, if you like. I didn't enjoy it at all. I felt so encaged and so trapped. But I think it would be safe to say maybe that it was depression. I'm not sure it was. I think I just felt like a bird trapped in a cage, and I needed to get out of it. And it got me to the point where I just so down. I didn't enjoy what I was doing. I didn't enjoy my life. I didn't enjoy the jobs I was doing. I was always bouncing from one job to another because nothing would make me happy. I'd get bored in a few weeks and just think, right, I can't do this anymore, and then go to something else. So I knew that I couldn't continue doing that for the rest of my life. I'm so glad it happened because it taught me such a valuable lesson that life is so short. At the end of the day, this is just a fleeting glimpse, and if I'd have carried on doing that, I wouldn't have been happy. So when Caitlin grew up and she left to go down to college, to go to college and then university in Bournemouth, pretty much immediately I packed my bags and just left. I was only renting at the time. I was in a council flat, so I just packed my bags and left, and it was a big choice for me because I didn't need to run away from anything. I don't think that was the case, but I needed to I was so unhappy. That wasn't me. I'm a happy bloke, kind of always the centre of attention at a party, having laughs and fun, but it just wasn't for me, and I wanted to change that immediately. So that's what I did. I had no money. I literally had nothing. I went out for a surf one day, and I was really pretty down at this point, wondering where my life was going to go. Caitlin had left, so I was obviously really sad about that, but that happening had opened up, I suppose, a window of opportunity for me to actually think about myself for a second, because I think even she saw that I wasn't particularly happy. And I went for a surf one day, and the biggest surf that I've ever rode in my life. Caught this incredible wave, landed on the beach, and walked up to the top of the cliffs with my surfboard, and just thought, I'm going to walk home. And in that moment, I just thought, just walk. Are you okay?
Yeah, just keep going. Why not? Why even stop at home?
Yeah, almost very Forrest Gump-esque.
Yeah.
And it really was like that. There was no plan. I had no money. I told a few people, and they all thought I was absolutely crazy, because I think the way they think about life and the way they think, everything has to be planned. You need to save up. You've got to have loads of money. What if this happens? What if that happens? I just shut all of that off and just thought, nah, this is my thing. I believe that I can do it. I'll make it work somehow. That was the confidence that I had in myself, given the fact that I'd spent so long just doing stuff outside, and I'd learned so much. And with a tenner, 2 days worth of rations, a pair of boots that didn't fit, a hole in the top of my tent, and just bung some clothes in there, I left. 4.5 years later, here I am.
That's really good for people to hear, that you did this with no money.
Yeah.
Because quite often, people make excuses that like you can tell inside they really want to do something significant like that.
Yeah, of course.
Before they die. But you can tell when someone's heart is saying, I've got to do this because it's on my bucket list. But then suddenly they're kind of their mind kicks in with all the fear and
Of course.
I couldn't do this because I haven't got any money.
Yeah.
What is I can't spare the time. I've got too many responsibilities. Those kind of things. But a lot of the time they're just, frankly, just excuses.
Of course they are.
So that you're coming from fear.
100%.
And for people to know that you've managed to do 4.5 years of non-stop permanent living in a tent, walking around the coast, and you started with 10 quid, and you haven't been doing jobs and stuff around. So, I mean, I know you've done a lot of eating wild food.
That's pretty much how I started it. The one thing, I never wanted to do this to, try and take off people. That's not what this was about. I'd been very poor before this, so I knew what it was like to not have food for a couple of days, and that goes to show you the state of mind that I was in. If I thought things like that was normal, so I knew that I was capable of doing that. And it was just very much. Look, I'm a firm believer in the one thing I always had in myself was full confidence. Whether it be in anything I do, if I put my mind to it, I know I could do it. But the important part was finding something that I was really passionate about. So it just, in my mind, it was really this simple. Whatever happens, I'm going to make this work. I think Jet, like a bit,
that's
a
all right,
camera
Jet,
spot right there, aren't you?
I'm not camera shy, are you, Jet?
Come lay down.
She's good. She's good.
It was very. I just really believed in myself, and that's so important. But it's ironic because I always looked at the first stage of this journey as kind of a honeymoon period. I was excited to get away from the life that I wanted to leave behind. Everything was great. I really hadn't settled into the walk for a very long time. I was at a point in my life where I wasn't really speaking to many people. I'd become so isolated purely on the basis that I just wanted to enjoy and have a bit of fun here and there. And I don't mean going out and spending money. For me, as long as I've got a guitar and a surfboard, and I'm outside, that's where I'm at. So I didn't need much for this. And I think because people, we certainly live in a society where it's a very consumerism society that we live in, and I didn't need any of that, and you don't need any of it. And let's be honest, the happiest times of my life have been having absolutely nothing, but just feeling great in here, and that's exactly what this walk has done for me.
Well, you're here now, alive, well fed, healthy, and that's on 4 years of no money.
Mission accomplished.
Yeah. We might get. I don't want to explore the foraging in a minute, but you brought up the silence and not talking to people. So something really special happens when you don't talk to anybody for days or weeks.
It does indeed.
And sometimes I would go. I don't think I ever went more than a week without talking to a person, but I certainly went several days in a row. And one of the things I noticed was when I would speak to someone, my vocal cords wouldn't work.
Tighten, yeah. You sound like you've just sucked in some helium or something.
Yeah. Which is odd. But what did silence do for you?
So, I think it was when I got to the west coast of Scotland and started getting to the wilder parts. So you start heading up towards the Oban sort of area, Fort William, and you start basically island hopping where everything took a change for me because there's so much noise everywhere. Television, radio, people, advice, people selling you stuff. When can you get a chance to think? I mean, I think literally the first time, if you have a family or anything like this, people get a chance to think is probably the 10 minutes before they go to bed and put their feet up. Otherwise they're consumed by television or something like this. So,
and that's suddenly where all their thoughts start coming up, and then they can't sleep.
And then they can't sleep, or they just shut it off because they've got to go to work tomorrow. So it's just not giving yourself a chance. But it was once I became really competent there's a lot of places in Scotland that you don't want to break a leg and stuff like this, so you're always focusing about that sort of thing. But once I became really competent in that, I'm always very aware. My day was so simple, hard but simple. So it'd be get up, pack my gear away. It is the same routine, but a routine that I like doing. Find a water source, make a cup of coffee, right, what can we eat today? Just always scouring the coast for good little foraging spots for shellfish and all this sort of stuff. And all of a sudden I just realised that I was doing like 9 hours of just thinking, and that's where I grew. I think people are so scared to be on their own, but actually it's a wonderful place to be. It's where you can get creative, amazing ideas start coming up. I started noticing a pattern that everything that I wanted to happen on this walk, I even wanted to do a documentary about it, and so I started getting creative in my mind, right, how can I make these things work? Because I'd given myself the space and time to do it and wasn't afraid to just spend days on end without anybody. And I realised this is really actually very healthy. And because of it, all those things come into fruition in the end, because I just learned that peace and that time in your own mind, not in a good place, is a dangerous, dangerous place to be. If you can transfer that, which can be done, I'm living proof, it's a wonderful place to be. I still to this day, throughout my entire life, wherever I am, will be going off to places on my own and just having time for me, just thinking. I wouldn't say it's there's different types of meditation, if you like, and I'm not one to sit in a room and meditate, but I'm certainly think that that's the place that perhaps I do it, even though it's different. It's a great place to be. I couldn't be happier, and I realise the importance of it, and I'd encourage anybody to do it.
So the type of meditative experience you are having probably falls more into the category of flow states.
Mm-hmm.
One of the kind of characteristics of the types of activities that generate a flow state are a kind of repetitiveness.
Yeah. I think that what really it was for me, the meditation, I'd walk over brows and I did a lot of scaling around the side of mountains, and all of a sudden it would just open up and I'd cry. I'd literally just suddenly, like, just this euphoric sort of, I'd just cry, and I didn't even understand why. But I think more for me that the meditation side of it was perhaps how grateful I felt that I'd given my time to really connect again with the outside world, with nature. It's a wonderful place to be. It's the reason we're here. I don't think we're nowhere near as grateful enough, as what we put out there. It's incredible, and it's those moments of silence in the evenings when you're just listening to the birds. I know it sounds cheesy, but listening to the birds, and I'd be laying in the tent, and even my hearing became better. I was so acute to little noises. I could hear the difference between a fox and a badger, the different sounds of different birds. So I'd spend my night doing that rather than, it was cold, I got wet during the day and whatever, but the perks of that was that I got to do that. So, that for me was, I'd say, a spiritual side of it. It wasn't the fact that I'd sit there and go into my own little world. I'd allow the world to come into me, and it helped.
I think with the flow states, what happens is that you have this sort of selfless experience where you become the thing you're doing. You become the 100%. Task. So
it's you, yeah.
It's important enough that you've really got to focus. So and that doesn't mean thinking. That means just paying attention to what you're doing. So if you're somewhere dangerous, and the stakes have got to be quite high to put you into this heightened state of alertness.
Yeah.
So as you say, when you're walking across rough terrain, you could break an ankle, break a leg, which in some of the wilder parts of Scotland is proper potential for dying.
A lot of people have lost their lives, a lot.
Yeah, because people quite often don't think of the UK having serious wilderness, but in the west coast of Scotland and the islands and stuff, it is legit wilderness.
Of course it is.
And
it's why they had
dangerous.
clans, You look at central Scotland, the mountain ranges and stuff like this, they had clans because it was so difficult for people to get from one place to another that they ended up just as clans and fighting with each other rather than working together. So
the geography,
really the layout,
separated.
Exactly. That's why Scotland's like it is, and there are some very wild places out there, and that's where it's at for me.
And you brought up another thing which is a characteristic of the kind of expansive experience of being in the wild spot on your own, is when you come upon one of those vistas that you can just see for miles. There's mountains, and sea, and you can see whales coming up in the sea, and all the seabirds and eagles. You see that, and it's awe-inspiring. That sense of awe,
of course it is.
Is deeply hard. The yearning to have experiences of awe is hardwired into the human psyche.
Of course it is.
And the way we tend to get that in a modern life is going to a cinema or something. You go to a cinema, you get blown away by the big sound, the big screen, all the effects and the emotion and all of that kind of stuff. But that's kind of what you have to do. Or you go to a nightclub, have some ecstasy, those kind of things. And those are all modern transformative experiences. But there's nothing as consistently powerful and delivering the goods as the experience of seeing some expanse of wilderness and going, oh my God.
And the fact that you're alone when you're doing it. I mean, that's even...
Yeah, you're not like sharing it with anybody.
No,
this is just for you. You can't... there's no pretense of... Exactly. You can't show off or whatever your experience.
And that, I think, is wonderful. I'd have it no other way. Obviously I've Kate with me now, but when I was doing those particular sections, I was nowhere near ready to have a partner or a girlfriend or anything like that. I wasn't ready inside myself, but there's my favourite times. Like I said, I'd often just break out in tears at the most beautiful scenery. But for me, it was more the peace of it all, and actually literally mean peace. It was. I said a bit about my hearing and stuff like this. This is what benefits I realised. Firstly, how healthier I felt. I was drinking water out of streams every single day, healthy, and there's fluoride in it, and that was really healthy. I was eating healthy food outside, albeit not as much as I'd like to have, but I was moving every single day, so it was hard to find. But I think the main sort of side of, I don't know, I got lost on that one, to be honest with you.
Lots of fresh air. About being healthy. Yeah,
lots of fresh air. But my hearing, when we come back into the busier areas, so I'd say Inverness was the first city that I saw in nearly 3 years. I hated it. I hated it. The buses were going past me. Normally, it would never have bothered me, but they were going past. Jet and I were both jumping out of our skin, and it just felt so loud. And I know it sounds ridiculous, but when you've just been surrounded by nothing but air, peace, and the worst thing you probably hear is some wind. Big winds and the tent rocking and back. Other than that, it's just pure silence,
and you would have had the sound of the sea in your ear
all the time.
All the time,
right next to the water.
And the sea is waves tend to the frequency of waves lapping on the shore is the same as I think I just heard this years ago, and this may not be true, maybe true, I don't know. It has the same kind of rhythm as human breathing, induces sort of lower brainwave patterns, like an alpha brain. So a lot of the kind of relaxation CDs and things have the sound of waves in the background.
Of course. There's a reason
for a reason.
For that. Yeah.
So when I did my 7 months, I was on the coast 90% of the time, and I remember when I left, it was so weird not hearing that sound.
Yeah. I don't ever want to be away from it.
It's a beautiful sound, and I live by the coast, and go there a lot.
But you've done it yourself, and to put people into the picture, you just imagine just being literally in the middle of nowhere. You can get out. I don't walk around everywhere naked, but I certainly did a lot there because I'd get out the tent, I'd just go and get in the sea, sit there. First thing I do in the morning, and that's just lush. Get back in the tent, then get a coffee on the little stove, and thinking about the day, and it was just so peaceful. And actually, because I knew how to forage, I could have easily, and I did it a lot of times. When I got to a place that was just mesmerising, I'd say, I'm going to stay here for 2 days. In fact, I'm going to stay here till I get bored and I want to move on. And that was just amazing. Absolute silence. The most you'd see probably is a boat in the distance. Otherwise, it was just you. And then the exploration side of it, just going outside and I love the routine of collecting firewood. Even when it's wet, you can still make fires easily if you know what you're doing. Collecting firewood and the whole process of it just strips you right back to what hunter-gatherers did, the ancestors originally. It strips you right back to that, and then you suddenly realise really what's important and how much nonsense there is.
So those basic things were heat, fire, shelter, and food, and water.
That was my life. That was it.
That's it.
And it's still the same. Even in the Western world, it's still very much the same, but there's just so much more going on to enable those things to happen. But it's just you have to work for it. Don't get me wrong. I stayed on an island for the first lockdown off the west coast of Shetland called Hildesay, and it was just me on my own for 3.5 months, with Jet of course. And my daily routines of once in a while a boat would come over and get me fresh water because I couldn't drink from the locks, it was blue algae in it. And the work ethic, every single day, just dragging these big 20-litre drums of water over to the other side of the island where it was safe. I'd be making fires, sort of, cookers basically on every section of the island. So depending on the wind direction means depending on where I can cook. So you really start homing into stuff that I would just never have thought about before. And it's a lovely skill to have. It really, really is. I feel completely confident that I can just be put somewhere and make a healthy living from it, regardless of where it was. And it's just a lovely way to live.
These guys, I can't remember the names. It was a husband and wife. They wrote this book called Natural Capitalism or something like that, and they had done this analysis where they'd the conclusion was that with all the machines and things that we use now in our modern lives, one individual would need 50 slaves.
Wow.
For all the cooking, food growing, washing, cleaning, construction, just to support the life of one modern human.
Wow.
So when you say, it's a lot of work, chopping wood, carrying water, pitching your tent, hunting for food, it really is a lot of work.
It is. But I'd rather be spending my day doing that.
Sure, yeah. Well, so you can be doing that. You're going right to the source there, rather than sort of. Not everybody sells their soul for their work, but a lot of people do. You basically pimp yourself out for somebody to pay your money, so you can pay other people to do those things for you,
exactly.
And you can just cut all of that off the top and 100%. Go right back down to the roots.
If you're prepared to, exactly. If you're prepared not to have so much stuff,
and experience some proper hardship. So you experienced. So the one thing modern humans don't ever experience is proper hunger, and
certainly in the Western world.
Modern people in the West. Yeah, I mean, there's lots of places in the world where I actually met someone from Somalia about 20 years ago, and we were talking, and when he asked me, he'd been a political prisoner in Somalia and stuff. He's had some serious difficulties in his life, and he asked me if I'd ever gone to bed hungry in my life, and I thought about it, and I honestly have never gone to bed hungry in my life. And when I told him that, he cried.
Wow.
He just
wow.
And I just that really hit me. So you, because for large periods of time you literally had no money and you were foraging in the kind of intertidal zone. And sometimes you couldn't get food, or the weather was so bad you couldn't get food. So I mean, what was that like? And first of all, what were the situations that put you in the position where you actually couldn't get any food?
Normally, the really big stretches, I had Jet with me. She was my priority. So I'd make sure that I had dog food for her all the time, often than not weighing down my bag to a point where I couldn't even fit anything in. So as long as I had a few carrots and stuff, I didn't need that, but that was a luxury. Just take some carrots and a few potatoes, so I could always make a stew from it. But it's definitely the bigger sections. But often or not, I did choose that as well. Because one thing I think that's, I've always done throughout my life is I've always put myself in a position where I have no choice. If I really want to do something, but something scares me about it, or I'm questioning it, then the only way to deal with that is just commit to it, and that's what I'd often do. So that's how I became good at it, simply by, once I'd walked a day and a half, then I had nothing, so that was it. My whole day changed. It was right, okay, I could probably walk for about this long. We'll get up earlier in the morning, so that I can get there so I can get to where I want to be roughly earlier, pitch up the tent, that's it, spend the rest of the afternoon after about 2 o'clock. But the difficult part is, certainly in Scotland, is the more north you go, you don't get very much light during the winter, so that became difficult. So I was doing really short days, my priority being that in the morning, and made sure that I had food, and then I made sure I had food in the afternoon, often just walking for an hour and a half, that's all it was. But I kind of like that though, everything was a challenge, but it's a beautiful challenge. It's just all it is just, like I said before, just taking you back to what you actually need. And it's fun to do. There's nothing nicer than going out, you know, working hard during the day, going out, finding a water source, once you've found a place to stay, going and foraging your food. You know, you're hungry, you've burnt loads of calories during the day, and I'm a hungry person. And by the end of all of that, you've got the fire on, it's peaceful, you've relaxed, Jet's in the tent, she's sleeping, she's had her food, and then suddenly I'm just sat, you know, with a meal, just the satisfaction that you get from that. There's nothing like going to Aldi's and buying, you know, buying a roast dinner and sticking it in the oven. It's a totally different ball game. Yeah, not enough people do it. It's sad.
But sometimes you'd arrive somewhere and there was just nothing.
Oh yeah.
To get. So
100%. So where I thought.
Yeah.
Sorry. So where I thought, right, that this, because you start getting good, I'd say, on the maps and understanding the layout of the land, and even just looking down the coast at times. Problems with Scotland, there's so many ins and outs and locks that you can't see what's around the corner. And yeah, there was definitely times where I thought, yeah, this part of the coast is this type of rock, you know, there's lots of seaweed and mussels will be around here depending on the time of year. You can eat them, and whelks and that are pretty much everywhere, but often not. That just doesn't happen for whatever reason. That's something to this day I still don't know, but sometimes there are just blank spots along a whole stretch, and yeah, it's not nice.
So what was the longest time you went without food?
Oh, probably before I even started the walk, but easy. When I first started, I did Anglesey in 5 days, and I didn't eat. That was 126 miles. I came off that an absolute wreck. That was because I was new to the walk, though. And
there's a difference going 5 days. So if you know, fasting was quite a common thing for vision quests and those kind of things. But normally, you know, you weren't necessarily walking all day. You're kind of sometimes isolated in an igloo or something,
just
or
conserving energy, basically,
or a hut or some, you know, designated wild spot. But if you're walking every day and you're not eating for 5 days, that is hardcore.
Yeah, I wasn't well after that. Lesson learned, you know. But I look back on it now, and I'm glad that it's happened. I try and learn from everything. And
what did you learn from that experience?
Don't do Anglesey again. No, I didn't. I think what I learned more than anything was, you know, I love limits and what the body's capable of, because I just don't think people realise anywhere near the potential they have and what the body's capable of doing. But I think it's a really good skill to have, so I now know that I can bust out a good few miles if I was ever in a really dangerous situation, that I can bust out a lot of miles for that amount of time without any food and still be okay. And that's a comfort blanket for me, you know. So that's I'd rather the positives. So yeah, I now know that I can do that and it's possible. I didn't know that before that. I
think that's one of the, if I was to tie it in with this thing of, I mean, not saying you're a boy becoming a man, I think we're about the same, you're 40s?
41, yeah.
41, yeah. So it doesn't really apply to you, but if someone was listening to this and they were, you know, late teens, early 20s, that kind of thing, and wanting to kind of find their own power, I suppose. That's what it's all, you know, becoming an adult is about gaining the next level of power. Yeah. Like a bit like a computer game, you know, you level up. And part of that is knowing that how deep your capacities are.
Of course,
exactly. because you only find that out by being tested.
You've got to push them, otherwise you'll never know. Yeah, I agree 100%. That's so important. It is all part of growing. And also, I despise the fact that words like mistakes and failure, even from school, you know, you make a mistake, you're made to feel bad about it, or you fail at something, you feel bad. No. They are so important. It's probably one of the most important things you can do. But, you know, I've always said this phrase that when you're a baby and you're learning to walk, you don't just get up and walk, you fall over so many times before you start, so you've got to make those mistakes. And you know, the Anglesey experience was a mistake for me, but you know, I learned from it. I got better at foraging. I grew from that, and yeah, I think all those things are really, really important, and we're always going to do it throughout our life. And I never really thought of it like that until I was on this. I never really did. So another thing that, you know, I just learned how important to make some hiccups, you know.
Yeah.
To balls up once in a while.
Yes, and when a mistake really hurts,
that's when you grow.
It becomes really ingrained in your soul, so to speak, and you really don't want to make that mistake in the future. Well, you probably will, but you've really learned a deep lesson there. Whereas when you're in the social context that we normally are in, your mistakes kind of get diffused amongst the other people around you. So you can make mistakes, and people around you will pick up the pieces.
Yeah.
Which is one of the reasons why we're such a successful species.
Yeah.
But when you're on your own, the mistake comes directly back to you instantly, and you have to live with the consequences. So you kind of learn to take responsibility, to be careful, to plan, but also and to take ownership. You have to take ownership of your mistakes, and I think one of the things I really admire in traits in people is to own to own their mistakes, to own who they are, own their flaws, all of those kind of things, rather than it's easy to pretend that you don't have those things by kind of bluffing with people, but when it's just you on your own, there's no one to bluff to. You have to own it because it comes directly back to you.
Of course it does, and along with that, the strength, is how you as a person deal with that. If I make a mistake, I never go and say to people I've made a mistake. I get it into my mind and go, what did I do wrong here? Okay, it's how you react to that I think, really defines you as who you are as a person, really. If you make a big mistake, or you think you failed, or you've tried it years for something and it hasn't worked and you think you failed, how you react to the next stage is a very defining point. And I think that's another thing that I've learned having so much time on my own. I used to get myself wound up about things stupidly, and whereas no, how you react to that is if I go and fall over and break a leg somewhere, and I'll know why I've done it, because probably 90% of the time you do it is because you're tired. It happened to me once. I was walking along and I knew I was tired, and stupidly I carried on because I was just in that mindset, that zone. The mind's a powerful thing, and I should have just stopped, but instead of stopping, I did an extra few miles. Lo and behold, got clumsy, and my ankle just went, and I was 14 miles away from any coast, any road, anything like this, literally at the bottom of cliffs. So I ended up having to make a crutch, and it took, I think, 2.5 days to drag myself back to the safety of a road. I'll never make that mistake again.
Yeah.
I didn't panic. That's the key. It's just not panicking, just sitting. Okay, breathe in. That
is such an important lesson to learn.
Yeah.
I knew someone who cut into on a Friday. They were a carpenter. It was like it was sort of 4:45 on a Friday in the afternoon. Last thing, and it was like, feeling tired, just wanted to do one more cut, and with a circular saw cut into his hands, like that deep.
Nasty.
He actually had it fixed, and it was amazing what they'd done, but nasty thing. And it was that kind of thing where, again, this is a really valuable thing to know in life, is when to make a call on the situation in the present moment, because what you're describing, I know I do this all the time. I have a plan, like that's the goal. I'm just gonna, like a bull, just charge for it. And then sometimes it's not right, but you're getting this weird kind of like tunnel vision, and you just, and lots of people do dangerous work.
Of course.
And I do a lot myself with chainsaws, power tools, circular saws, all those kind of things. And felling trees is extremely dangerous, because trees do all sorts of crazy stuff you not expect. You've really got to be on it, and if you're working with other people, part of a team, because you were in the army as well, so this is all part of that kind of culture of having each other's back.
Of course.
And that's something you learn by putting yourself as an individual in these situations. Is you develop that kind of it's like a spider sense, like Spider-Man, of kind of like, this doesn't it doesn't feel right.
It's going with your gut on that, isn't it?
Yeah.
I know, I totally understand that, and it's absolutely valuable. Again, it's all part of the learning process, isn't it? Knowing your limits, and You know, that incident of me hurting my ankle changed the scope of my entire walk. And I was at a point where I'd realised perhaps it was very, okay, I want to get this far today, and then that'll leave me blah blah blah. So I was going through that almost routine process which I promised myself I wouldn't do, and because of that I really hurt myself. So I made a pact to myself as from that minute, right, just go, walk, you know, you can forage, stop when you need to, save enough energy for the next day, don't make stupid mistakes like that again. So it was a game changer. I'm glad it happened.
Yeah, it reminds me, so I think Ray Mears was saying something in one of his shows about drinking water, that if you've got a limited amount of water, you should, and you're getting thirsty, you should drink it, because if you try and ration it too much, you'll start making mistakes as you get more dehydrated,
Course,
and then,
of course.
you know, so it's kind of weighing up those kind of things.
Yeah, it is exactly that. Yeah, if you know what you're doing, you know, if you are running out of water, and you just drink as much of it as you can. And then a lot of people have died from making the mistake of drinking urine, because they've drunk it when it's starting to go the wrong colour. So it's basically all the toxins coming out, whereas if you drink it pretty much whilst it's still half decent, then you can survive it. So I'd rather drink the lot and then regurgitate that, and then do it again, rather than, like you said, sipping it.
Yeah, I remember that one. I haven't ever gone quite so far as drinking my
Hopefully you don't have to. Yeah. I did a few times in the Paris.
in the pub.
Yeah.
So
boys.
there's a big difference between doing something voluntarily and doing something involuntarily. So solitary confinement is universally recognised as the kind of worst punishment for humans.
Yeah.
Because it's you know, we are such social beings.
Yeah.
But it's the fact you didn't choose it.
Yeah, exactly.
But if you choose to do something, like be on your own, it's an entirely different experience.
Of course it is.
So I think that's an interesting distinction there between, you know, being kind of in control of that versus not being in control.
Yeah. It's two different things, isn't it? I suppose if you're in control of something and you made the choice to do it, it's very different to someone saying to you, right, go and sit in that room for the next 5 days. But again, you know, it's how you approach that, isn't it? If I was told to be locked in a room for 5 days, I wouldn't particularly enjoy it, but I wouldn't come out a mess. I'd have learned something.
Yeah. Well, so
find a way.
This is one thing that people worry about, spending a lot of time on their own, is going mad. And I when I, you know, did my walkabout, I certainly experienced some weird behaviour and some kind of. I was kind of transitioning out of some self-harming behaviours to do with, you know, different substances and eating the wrong foods and, you know, just the kind of mental things. And some of these would come up, and you know, I was quite extreme about my diet. And I remember one time just thinking, I'm just going to eat some ice cream. I'm just going to get an ice cream, and I ate it, and then I ate another one, and I think I ate 3 or 4, and then I forced myself to walk up this really big hill as a kind of punishment. And I was like, so I was doing all this kind of weird stuff, and I didn't take any tobacco with me. I was trying to sort of stop smoking.
Yeah.
But I'd end up kind of like hanging around pubs sometimes and like bumming cigarettes on people, and I wasn't drinking alcohol because you know, you couldn't carry it with me, and there's no point and that kind of thing. But you know, I was a bit of a kind of binge drinker on weekends, those sort of things, and you know, that would kind of creep in, and I'd suddenly find myself kind of you know, going to pubs, and then I'd get drunk, and then I'd end up back at my tent, and I'd just be a complete mess, and I'd be crying, and all of this weird sort of things happened. So you know, what did you experience any weirdness come up inside you that was unexpected?
I mean, or
perhaps you might have been expecting it to happen.
No, weirdness probably no. I mean, I think people would class me as quite weird anyway. Some of the stuff, you know, what I'm doing, but I don't think weirdness as such. But I think there was certain things that I'd realised perhaps the isolation had affected me. 3.5 months on your own island, if you would just go straight from a house, from here for example, and just be plonked there, would probably be great for about 3 days, and then afterwards it's like, oh dear, okay, I'm stuck here. And how you choose that as a mindset is up to you. But what I think I realised, and probably going back to the drinking thing you were just talking about, when I came back into more built up areas, Inverness probably being my first, and it's actually after I met Kate. I got a lot of followers, and I don't like taking anything from anybody, but every now and then these followers would be coming down with bottles of whiskey, all the way along the coast, probably not realising that there was probably a period of time where I'd been drinking every single night, because I was just there. I was alone in the tent, and I think that is probably a repercussion of having so much time on my own, and obviously not drinking, to then being back in amongst people. Maybe I was finding that hard to process, I don't know, because I knew what was coming. I was coming to the busiest cities in England, and I wasn't particularly looking forward to that, because I set myself a challenge of walking the UK coast. I had to finish this, and I'm going to finish it, but I wasn't looking forward to coming to the cities again in the built up areas. And just one day Kate turned around to me and was like, mate, do you realise you're knocking back pretty much one little bottle of whiskey a night? And I'm like, wow. It took somebody else to tell me that. And only recently, when I reunited with my mum again, she would tell me that I'd be phoning her up drunk and stuff like this, and it was her that made me realise. She turned around to me and said, look Chris, the only reason we did that is because you've literally been on your own in a tent every single night now for nearly 4 years. Well, 3 years before I met Kate. And when I sat back and thought about it, I thought, maybe that was the case. It hit me quite hard, that did, if I'm honest with you. Because I loved it. It's hard because I didn't know whether it was the fact that I was coming into busier areas and I didn't want to leave where I'd just been, because I just had so much fun and I learned so much. I found my place. And then one of my things in life now is I simply will never do, unless it's to help somebody else, anything that I don't want to do again. Life's too short, and I was suddenly in that position where I do have to go and do something that I want to do. So I was so conflicted. In my head it was like, should I just go back and carry on doing this coast of Scotland? So there's a real little battle in my head that went on as to whether to actually do that. And that's no disrespect to England or the southeast coast of Scotland. It was just cities, not places I want to be. So yeah, surreal. I didn't think I went stir crazy or anything. I always kept myself occupied when I was walking. I was always singing, and I'd become there's almost like an obsession of coming up with creative ideas. I play guitar and I was coming up with songs in my head, so all day I was busy in here, but good things.
You didn't have a guitar with you? No,
I didn't have a guitar. Once in a while, when I came into like a hamlet or a village and I had followers there, they'd say, look, we know you play guitar, do you want to borrow one for an evening? And I would. But I really loved doing that sort of stuff, and even now I'm still writing my own songs. I have a guitar now and writing my own songs from stuff that I was writing in my head on an island, so it's great. But yeah, what I mean by this is, I suppose, is that coming back into the busier parts, no longer am I thinking so much like that anymore. I'm not giving myself the time to come up with, I love history and I love nature and I love doing videos about that kind of stuff, and I'm suddenly finding myself where I don't have much time to concentrate on that, because we do have quite a few followers, and every day just people waiting for us on the coast, and you spend 3/4 of your day walking with other people asking you questions. And over in Scotland it was the perfect balance, because I'd be out in the wilds for a long time and I was looking forward to catching up with a few people and saying hello to people that was following, but now it's a constant, so I'm looking forward to getting back out there.
So the one thing I wanted to because this would be interesting for people to hear,
okay,
is what did you eat when you were foraging? So people think of they so let's say someone was listening to this or watching this and they were like, I fancy doing something like this, but the foraging aspect of it, I just wouldn't even know where to begin. And the coast is a particularly rich place for foraging, and if you look at a map on the world where people live, basically people live around the coast.
Yes, it's for Australia and places like this. It's all coastal.
So what was what were you eating?
So the hard thing about foraging in the position that I was in is, you touched briefly on Ray Mears earlier. Love the guy. I think he's the best out there, if I'm honest with you. And when you see Ray Mears, he'll set up a camp. He'll go out and explore, find the good foraging spots. So he knows where it all is, which is great. I'd love, I've often not set up camp for a few days, but otherwise I'm on the move every single day. So often than not, where I pitch camp is somewhere where it's rich with things like shellfish. I predominantly lived off shellfish for so long.
It's a good job you're not allergic.
I know, but the thing is I hate them. And ironically, I'm not a fan of walking. I just like what it brings. But yeah, shellfish was the main thing for me. Foraging is such a sketchy subject, to teach people if you're not teaching them face to face, for example, because I never wanted to do foraging videos and stuff when I was out in the wilds, because if I was to teach somebody something and they made one mistake, you pick the wrong type of whelk, or you pick a dog whelk or something like this, they can be pretty nasty. And so I kind of just gathered all my experiences, but moving forward every single day, you're in a different place every day, you never know what's there. So, which is predominantly why I stuck to shellfish. I'd make stews with even seaweed. Seaweed's so good for you.
But even with seaweeds, there are toxic seaweeds.
Absolutely,
I think that's from memory, they're the ones that are sort of like with all the thin, they look like trees.
That's exactly
trees. Yeah. Whereas the kind of the bladder rack and those kind of what's that one that's like a kind of strip of leather, like a belt.
It is. It's called, names. This is the thing with foraging.
I've eaten that stuff and got properly ill because I
ate
the stuff that was. It wasn't fresh. It was, you were telling to me the other day about this kind of bit where it doesn't get covered by water enough of the time.
Yes, with mussels.
And I had serious diarrhea, and that was just the perfectly edible type of seaweed.
Wow. It is. Yeah, with things like mussels, people make the mistake with mussels in summer. The mussels that are closest to the shore, obviously, once the tide's gone out, it's spending 8 hours a day out of water, so algae starts to grow and. Deadly for you, so you go on a low tide and then get them from there. But I've always said that with foraging, it's as important to know not what to eat, obviously, even simple things like stinging nettles. There's other plants in early spring that look very much like stinging nettles. Sorry, not stinging nettles, like garlic. Wild garlic, you pick the wrong one and that's it. You do that in the wild when there's no one there to help you. So
there's that very famous story, Into the Wilds, the film,
yes, that's
the book, and that's how that guy ended up dying, wasn't
exactly
it? Berries.
Yeah. Exactly that. Well, he thought they were berries. I think they were potato seeds or something, weren't they?
Yeah, I think they were some thing that stopped his body absorbing nutrients.
That's it. It starved him, basically.
Yeah.
Very sad. Very sad. But it's really important. I will start doing a lot more on it, but I'd rather people be face to face.
Sure, it's dangerous.
Yeah, it's dangerous,
but possible. I mean, it's really possible.
You've got garden outside. You've got dandelions, daisies. You can eat the lot.
You took rabbit snares with you as well.
Rabbit snares.
Yeah.
Did you catch many rabbits? with a rabbit snare?
Yeah. Okay. Well, just to quickly tell the story, because this is a good one. Going back to that thing of making mistakes, trying to foresee what can happen. You've got to plan for the knowns, and then the unknowns, the unexpected, and you kind of like limit the possibility of damage.
Yeah.
And I'm sure you were quite. If you tell the story, that would be great. And I'm sure you were quite annoyed with yourself, perhaps, for making that mistake.
Yeah, I was.
So what was the story?
So it's quite simple, really. I was in Barra, which is the bottom section of the Outer Hebrides. Beautiful, beautiful place. And I was walking and stupidly, even to this day I'm annoyed with myself for doing it. This happened, but whatever. I had Jet's dog bowl on the side of my bag, clipped onto a carabiner. I basically used a penknife to get through it, so I just didn't have any room in my bag, so I needed it for supplies. So I clipped it to the edge, and typically in the Hebrides, the winds can just come from nowhere. It really just be lovely one minute and then bang, you're getting hit by them. And that's exactly what happened. The bowl had come round and hit me in the side of the face. And because I was the only one there, I'd be safe to say it knocked me out. But I don't know too much, So all I know is I kind of come round and I was all fuzzy, and it had cracked my tooth in half, pushing the back edge down into my gum. which was effectively right on my nerves. And it was awful. And I'm not a big fan of, I love teeth, but I don't like anything to do with, I'm not a fan of going to a dentist or anything. So again, I had that sort of like I had like a second of panic, and then straight away it just kicked in, right, just practice what you preach now. Just sit there, gather your thoughts, and tears streaming down me, blood down my face. And so actually before I went through the whole process of trying to get this thing out, I pitched up the tent, I got jet sorted, and then whilst I was doing that, I remembered that I'd been given a hip flask of whiskey that was sat right at the bottom of my bag, so I pulled it all out and then just poured the whiskey on this thing and then drunk it. So I basically necked half a thing of whiskey, and then I just used the rabbit snare, and I had to use my phone as a mirror to try and get this thing in, but because it had gone in the way it had, it was so awkward, so I couldn't get it. I was there for about an hour and a half, just trying to get this thing out, and then I did get it on camera, I got it all on video, and eventually I went to pull this out, and I got a rock on the end of it, and then I went to, because I wanted to show people how not to panic in these situations and how to deal with this kind of stuff. And the next minute this rock just dropped and the thing come poofing out, and then I spewed everywhere. And then after that realised that I was a bit too drunk off the whiskey. I used it as obviously an antiseptic to get rid of it, but it was another example of, just not panicking. That could have easily, I would say, go wrong. It wasn't exactly going to kill me or anything like this, but it's not a nice place to be when it's so severe, the pain. And you start running around panicking, what am I going to do, what am I going to do? Whereas, chill, think for a second now, what's the most logical thing to do? And then do it.
Rabbit snare.
A rabbit snare.
Yeah, it's really resourceful.
It was either that or an ice skate from like Castaway. Yeah, you just got to harness and just think.
Yeah.
If I'd have panicked, I wouldn't have thought of that. And I wouldn't have thought of the whiskey.
Yeah, that's true. Yeah, yes, because panic shuts down
That's
your ability to see the bigger picture and all of that.
Just take a step back.
Totally.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that's with every aspect in life.
Yeah. So there's another thing you were telling me the other day, which is related to this thing of panicking, was you were coming down a mountain. So the weather is a big thing when you're in the wild. It's all about the weather.
It's everything, yeah.
And in the Highlands and Islands of Scotland, weather is really severe.
Yeah.
And you were up a mountain, and then you were coming down the mountain. There was a whiteout.
Yeah.
And then you made the decision to,
Yeah.
rather than keep going, to
That's
stop.
it. It sounds really crazy. I used to spend a lot of my time. I used to do in the evenings when my daughter was asleep, wasn't playing guitar, I'd be watching stuff on YouTube. And often or not, people will watch all of the things that you should do. I had this little thing about watching people that had made mistakes. I loved watching climbing documentaries and disaster documentaries of people that had gone climbing and what they did wrong. So I learned from all this kind of stuff. And yeah, again, you're absolutely right. It's all back to the panic thing. I was on top of a mountain. The winds did come in. It was absolutely brutal. I would say a lot of people would have really panicked at that point and just done what a human naturally would try and do, just get down, but I couldn't see a thing. So yeah, I'd seen in a documentary once about this, and then I just thought, right, you know what, just remain calm. Again, the same thing, just sit down, have a second, have a think, what am I going to do? What's the most logical thing to do is wait for this to pass. It could have taken days, I didn't know, because didn't have any signal or anything where I was, so yeah, just pitch up the tent, sat in there. I was nervous and very scared the whole time, because until you're in that position, it's very hard to describe to somebody what it's actually like when you're in that position. It's not a nice place to be. You suddenly realise how vulnerable you are, and just a little ant basically in a swimming pool. It's just, it's very scary, but it's all about keeping calm, isn't it? And just learning from all that sort of stuff.
And you could apply that lesson to, just someone living in a city or whatever, sort of normal modern life. That kind of the storm on the mountain is a different kind of event in your life.
It's scary.
So it might be some catastrophe in your business or something, and you might panic and make some bad decisions and rush into it. But
exactly.
To do the kind of equivalent of pitch your tent, take some time.
It's be the calm in the storm, isn't it?
Yeah.
It really is. Yeah, just take that step back and have a think about it. Yeah, you're so right. You can do that in anything, like at work. Just anything. It's all about just, and I can tell you this because I didn't do that before. I would, rush into something and then end up making the situation even worse. But yeah, it's all about taking a step back and just saying, okay, this hasn't gone particularly the way I planned, so how do we make it right?
There's something different about, so the people that live in the Hebrides, for example, they seem very, very different to the people that I've met, more often in my life, on the mainland. And there's something about the isolation, the quietness, the remoteness of it, the view, because the Hebrides a lot of them are quite small islands, and you're just, wherever you look, there's an enormous expanse of sea you're looking out on. The kind of the beauty of the all the clouds and the sea, the different you get all these rich colours changing all day, and you add all of that in, the different kind of lives people live, the crofting, the fishing. It's a very, very different type of lifestyle, and it makes a different person. Yeah. So how would you describe the difference between the people that live in these wild spots?
I absolutely, categorically agree with you on everything you said there. They are a different breed. I think a lot of that is down to, obviously, smaller communities. There's not many people on the islands as there is, for example, in cities and stuff. And I've always said that I didn't think you could be more isolated than living in a big city. No one really talks to each other. You can go to London and walk past 1,000 people a day and no one says hello. You go to somewhere like the Outer Hebrides, or the Hebrides, and every man, dog, woman, child will all wave their hands to you. Every car that drives past you waves their hands. I've got some wonderful little things with the Hebrides and even Shetland and Orkney as well. Even the kids, young kids. I was having food with a family. A young lad ran in. The weather was awful outside and it really wasn't good. And he goes, "Oh, Mum, I'm just going to go and pop over to," I forget her name, basically an elderly lady's, to go and see if she's okay and if she needs anything. And I was just like this, wow, did you ask him to do that? And she said, no, they just do it. They all do it around here. So they literally go round to the old elderly and say, do you need any coal? Do you need any wood? Do you need me to go to the shop for you? Is there anything you need? So they look after each other incredibly, and I love that. I didn't feel like there was a place for me, not I wouldn't say in Swansea, but anywhere I went, because I didn't like that busy, rushed, madness sort of attitude to life. It just wasn't for me. And I realised when I went to the islands that actually there is a place that I would happily fit in, somewhere like that, because it's a much more relaxed way of life. What can I say? I've sat and had meals with 95-year-old Hebridean women that wouldn't let me get off my chair. We sat and drank whiskey together. She made us a roast dinner, but she loved it. You could just see she absolutely loved it. And we talked briefly about that kind of stuff, and she said everyone just supports each other out here. The winds are brutal. We need each other. You need everyone in a big city. You've got everything you need there, so it cuts all the people out, if you like. So I think that's why it is. Much smaller communities, the fact that the weather's brutal, they've got ancestral roots dating back from those islands to, forever. And so that's, it's important, isn't it? That sort of thing. I think it's very important. And I think that's probably why it is, and I absolutely adore it. I really do. You look after each other. And
I know what you mean. There's a friendliness there that's different to other places, and also a kind of just a sort of a slowness, and a kind of laid backness, a little bit like what we think of the sort of Southern European type of vibe. And it's just interesting to spend time with people like that you spend a lot of time in the other circumstance of
I've got to go now. I've got to go.
That's it. And it changes when you see somebody living like that. And you spend time with them. It actually changes. You're like, wow! You notice the difference. These people are different.
You really can notice the difference. A very quick story. It's a perfect example. So you look at the streets of London. You walk by a curb. You've got cars beeping, ambulances going off everywhere, and all sorts. I remember being, I think it was in Harris, and there was a road that was on the coast. It was literally the water, so I had to be on it. And then, so a car pulls up, and like beeps the horn and then pulls in. But he was on the road, and he was obviously a follower, so I went over and started chatting to him. Now another car come, which he was stopping him, and then another car come, and it was stopping him, and I was like, oh, really sorry guys, it'll be 2 seconds. The guy gets out of the other car, comes over, oh, everything all right guys? Next minute, there's nearly a queue of cars, and they've all come out to come and say hello, having no idea, there was no one, oh come on, we got to go. It was beautiful, I loved it. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. Everyone is just so chilled. Yeah, just can't beat that, can you? Can't beat it. If that had been me doing that somewhere in a big city, I'd be everyone swearing at me and honking horns and all sorts, but they were just, something interesting here. Oh, well, let's go and have a look. Next minute, we're involved in a conversation. I actually made friends, really good friends with 2 of them. Yeah. Which is awesome.
That is awesome, man. So you have been describing to me the last couple of days how you developed this sort of sense of when you go to a spot, you suddenly you can kind of pick up all the things that make it a good place to for a habitation. Yeah. Whether you're camping in a tent or whatever, and you develop the same kind of intuition that our ancestors did. Absolutely. Of they find a place, they see all the resources are all kind of like, it's like the stars align, in terms of resources, and you're like, this is a good place. Yeah.
I love all of that stuff.
Yeah. So what were the things you started to notice, and what was that experience like? Because this is tapping into an aspect of our psyche that people don't normally exercise.
Sure, 100%.
Well, I suppose we exercise it in a different way. You go to a high street, and if you took someone from Papua New Guinea, from a hill tribe in Papua New Guinea, and put them in Oxford Street or something, they would be totally disoriented. Oh, yeah. They'd be like,
horrible.
Where do I go to do anything? So it's you take someone from Oxford Street and put them in the west coast of Scotland on their own or something. A similar experience might happen in terms of like they might camp somewhere and then the tide comes in, exactly. Or they camp somewhere and a tree falls on them. I mean, sure. There's all sorts of things that happen. So what was that experience like for
you? I love that sort of. I love history and how our ancestors, it's something that's always pickled my brain. How did they live? All this kind of stuff, always going on in my mind. I love it, I really do. And I think once I'd become really good and competent as a camper, and I knew to be aware of the things that were a threat to me, for example, things like weather and all this kind of stuff. I started just choosing out spots, and over time I'd be like, that'd be an interesting place. I could see down from the side of a hill or a mountain or something, and that would be a really interesting place to camp. It's got everything I need. You can always tell where the water's running down because the trees clump much closer together and there's a small dip, so you can just see this faint line. So we know we've got a water source there. And I would say 80% of the time in the middle of nowhere, when I'd seen in the distance a place that I think would be a really good place to camp for all those reasons, water supply, potentially good for foraging, it's got a little inlet where you could perhaps go and have a bath, all this kind of stuff. There would be some sort of ruin there. And I'm not just talking ruin from the 1700s and way back. And you can tell the difference because the older they are, tend to be the more submerged they are. I can literally look over the opposite side of the loch and say, that's where I'm going to camp, there's going to be a good spot there. You just get it. I mean, it's not because it's the most greenest, perfect, flattest, often not, that's not the case. But it's just the whole, if the wind suddenly decides to take a change, then, this is a great place to camp because if it's coming from the north, I can go behind this. If it's coming from the south, I can go behind this, and so on and so forth. Or, majority of it's mountain anyway, so you're protected from one side. So it's all those little things that you've really got to, it's absolutely key, it's vital. But, going back to what we were saying, 80% of the time there would be some sort of old ruin there, some where you can just about see the stones, whereas some I could see from higher up, where it's just like there's a patch of, darker grass, if you like, that you can see into a man-made shape. And so it's really fascinating. So in the evenings, when I'd be in these kind of places, I'd just sit there and just, try and work out, what made this perfect for what potentially could have been a family. Often or not, you'll get places like that where just sheep herders will just go and spend a couple of days there herding the sheep in and then going back home, getting them that direction. So there's all this kind of stuff, a lot of Viking houses, Viking stuff all over the place. And often I'll be walking through somewhere and I'd see something and I'd plot it on my phone where it was, and I'd go back and ask somebody, and they'd be, oh, no, we had no idea that was there, bloody hell. So they'd then go out and have a look at it, and next minute, yeah, it is something. So I don't know, I'm just fascinated in how I think that, our long-term ancestors, dating back, thousands and thousands of years, not given enough credit for, we celebrate this day and age, days for painting, days for dogs, days for ladies, days for men, and all this kind of stuff, but no one actually really says anything about our ancestors, and they lived through an ice age, and they did it all just off, the land. Didn't have any machinery, any metal, and it fascinates me how they did it. I remember I was in Shetland, to give you an example, living outside for so long in the cold all of the time, is I don't say you get used, no, you don't suddenly not become cold, but you start becoming used to it. So I knew my hands were cold, I definitely knew, but it wasn't bothering me because it just happened so many times before, it's become normal. And I was in Shetland, and there's a mock Viking house that's built on top of where a Viking house was built. And it's the very northern island in Shetland, which is Unst, the northern point being Muckleflugga. And I was walking past, and it was Christmas the next day, and I could smell from the houses all of the roast dinners that were being prepared for. And I can't tell you, I literally had a tin of beans, and I had some Yorkshire puddings that were frozen, and that was my Christmas dinner. I was just going to tip them on top. But I walked into this house, and it was a cold day. We had hailstone, brutal winds. Actually, one cut me. And I just walked into this Viking house, and the second I shut the door, it was like someone had turned the central heating on. So I started getting an understanding of, actually, it's not as bad as what we've been too spoiled. It's not as bad as what I thought it was for them, because they had good stuff, good gear, good clothes, hides from animals and all this sort of stuff, not top man jumpers. And I was just learning so much more about that sort of stuff, and I just find it all so fascinating, and how resilient we are, and how, and I hate to say it, kind of weak we've become. And that's because of the disconnection of nature.
Yeah, I think we're sort of, a lot of modern humans think that humans have got more intelligent or something as time's gone on. And I feel like I'm a firm believer in multiple intelligences. So there's no such thing as like a single measure of intelligence.
Emotional intelligence.
So there are things that we've developed certain lines of intelligence way beyond what our ancestors had done, but they had lines of intelligence that are way beyond what we have, and so, some of those things we kind of lost.
Of course.
And I think one of an experience I had of experiencing ancient architecture and how effective it was I spent 3 days and 2 nights inside a chambered cairn in the Brickleaf Mountains in Sligo. And it was made of nothing but slabs of stone and then large rocks on top of it. That was it, just dry stone, and the weather was horrendous outside, and that's one of the reasons why I spent so much time in there. And I was dry as a bone inside. Not a single drop of water came in, which I could scarcely believe it. I could see what it was built of, and it was baffling to me how it happened. It was just so well built, and this thing was
still there.
5,000 years. People don't know exactly how old these things are, but they're about 5,000 years old.
I remember Iron Age sort of.
When I was sleeping in that cairn, I remember saying to myself, probably there might not at this night there might not be a single person in Europe sleeping inside an older building than I am right now. That's quite a thought.
And it's thought-provoking, isn't it? And then when you're in there, it's just kind of, like you said, the architecture, and the fact of the matter is it's still standing. A modern house won't be standing in 5,000 years' time, there's absolutely no doubts about it. So, they did things properly, but for the right reasons. They didn't want a house that looked really pretty and everything, they just wanted to be out in the cold and sheltered from winds, and they incorporated that into everything, cairns being an example. I slept in one myself, 2 with the dogs in Orkney, and it's mesmerisingly fascinating, the manpower, the effort to do all of that sort of thing as well. They couldn't just get on a JCB and drive up with a trailer of rocks. They had to work for this, and
Yeah.
Crazy.
Big slabs of stone. Huge.
How did they lift that?
Yeah. Just lots of people, I suppose, and levers and things like that.
It is. It's crazy because I know the cairns themselves. They used to leave the bodies, a bit away from the cairns, but outside for however long, so that nature can basically take back. All the other animals would come and feed off the bodies, and then they'd put them on a slab when they're skeletons, and then basically put another slab on top for the next. So you've probably got 500-600 years of
flat-packed humans.
Yeah, flat-packed humans. Yeah, it's like IKEA for humans. Yeah, but either way, fascinating. Yeah.
Wow.
They don't get enough credit.
No.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much, Chris, for having this conversation.
My absolute pleasure.
And may it benefit many people.
I hope so. Yeah. Get out there, guys.
Yeah. And so people can find out more about what you've done. You've done a documentary.
Yes.
Which I haven't seen yet. I'm so looking forward to seeing it. What's your documentary called?
So it's on iPlayer. It's a series called Our Lives, and it's called The Long Walk Home. So we did that filming basically in Scotland. So it's a good little documentary. It's just won an award actually.
Oh yeah, BAFTA.
Yeah, I thought I'd pick myself up there. For
it's been nominated for BAFTA.
It's nominated for BAFTA, but it just won a television award for up and coming basically documentary. So hopefully there'll be a second one out soon.
That's awesome.
Thank you.
And there's is it Chris Walks the Coast?
Chris Walks the UK.
Chris Walks the UK, and then Kate has one called Kate Walks the Coast.
Kate Walks the Coast, that's it.
Kate Walks the Coast.
That's on Facebook and Instagram.
And if people want to get involved with sponsoring the charity you've been doing it for, what's the best way to do that?
Just all on there. The link's at the top of the page. If not, just chriswalks.com into Google or whatever, and it'll come up. So that'd be much appreciated.
Awesome, dude.
Thank you. Oh yeah,
we'll do that.
We'll do
let's say the modern one. We do the ancient one.
Yeah.
How about the oldest one of all?
Yes, and the best.
Yeah.
Cheers, mate.
Awesome.
Thank you, Ralph.
I made all the music that I use in my podcasts. If you'd like to hear more of my music, please visit SoundCloud and check out my profile, Ralph Cree.